One of the things that I think parents resort to that's really, really common that I actually think has the inverse effect of what we want it to have is fear. If you don't, then this punishment or this bad thing will happen. Whatever they're afraid of is their motivator, and whatever they're afraid of probably isn't going to last forever. If they are afraid that if they come home with a bad report card, they're going to get grounded, they will care about bad report cards and then they won't care anymore, because there's nobody there to ground them. So we're actually not setting them up for success when that is the tool we are using to push forward any motivation.
Hello and welcome to Mindshift, a PLCS Empowerment Collective podcast. My name is Christopher and I'm one of your hosts today.
And I'm Deb. I'm your co-host. Welcome, everyone.
And Deb, today we're talking about motivation in a little bit of a different way than maybe how you've heard it talked about before. So our focus today is on how we can move out of the way and help kids identify what they care about to bolster their motivation.
Well, I'm excited to talk about this topic because not only am I interested in what he has to say about motivation, but this is one of my dear friends. So can we have you introduce yourself, Nick?
Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Zadina. I am the manager of training and quality assurance at the Boys Town National Hotline. And I've been in this role for almost a year and a half, but have a history of working in the community in the training spaces, change on child welfare, domestic violence, power-based violence, all of the things. So thank you so much for having me.
So thinking about the work that you do and young people who may be in crisis, what is the intersection between young people in crisis and motivation?
So when young people are in crisis, it's not that they're not motivated to solve their problems. It's that they're stuck in understanding what the problem is. That's what I have found when listening to calls here, at least. So for example, somebody calls because they are overwhelmed. And then they tell us all the reasons that they're overwhelmed. And what we say is, I can absolutely understand why you'd be overwhelmed. It sounds like there's a lot going on. And it's not just coming from one part in your life. It sounds like your dad has really high expectations of you. It sounds like you really want to be on the track team and succeed in that. Also, you really miss your friend that moved away and you want to date, but you have no idea how. That is a lot. And so what you're doing is you're reflecting back at them at how much it is. And then you say, what do you think is the most important of these things?
So it sounds like you're affirming.
Yeah, you
right?
affirm their experience, right?
And then you're helping them break it down.
Mm-hmm.
So you're partializing the different problems.
Mm-hmm.
And you're asking them to prioritize.
Yeah, because we all need practice with that. We all need to figure out where things matter and where things don't matter. And by the way, teens, they're not always going to say that the biggest problem is the same problem that we think is the biggest problem. But what that means is if we say, well, it doesn't matter, you just need to get good grades, then we're not going to be a resource for them anymore because we aren't talking about what they care about. Whereas if we did actually address, oh, you really want to figure out how to get a significant other or how to have a healthy relationship, great, let's talk about that. And then after they figure that out and feel like they have steady footing on that, guess what? They're probably going to get better grades because this big problem that they are worried about is overtaking all the other ones, and they can't get anybody to talk to them about it because nobody else maybe thinks it's a big problem.
So, Nick, let's extrapolate that now into a family.
Yeah.
And a parent is trying to get their child to do their homework, to make their bed, to brush their teeth, and the kid is not at all motivated to do any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest that a parent do to help with motivation?
One of the things that I think parents resort to that's really, really common, has the inverse effect of what we want it to have, is fear. If you don't, then this punishment or this bad thing will happen. So you have to do this. The thing about that is whatever they're afraid of is their motivator, and whatever they're afraid of probably isn't going to last forever. So we're actually not setting them up for success when that is the tool we are using to push forward any motivation. When a kid is struggling with something, I want to know more about what are the things that they are they worried about the struggle? Because if they aren't worried about the struggle, then the struggle is not an issue because it's not a struggle for them. They actually aren't struggling, they just don't care. And that's a totally different problem. So first you have to figure out if it is an I don't care problem or if they're actually struggling with it. And then if it's an I don't care problem, why don't you care about it? One of the tools that we used to do in motivational interviewing training that I loved is we would give people a stack of cards. And this stack of cards had 50 different values written on it. People would pick out their 5 most important, and we would share them in small groups. And then we would talk about, how do your values show up in what you struggle with? Versus how do those values show up with something that somebody else struggles with in a different way? And then we can start getting a sense of, why do we have ambivalence about some of the things that we're ambivalent about? A lot of times when people have ambivalence about something, it's because they think something is wrong with them. A lot of times they're ambivalent about it because it's something right with them. I don't care about this because I care about this more.
And when you think about, so that kind of what you just said with the ambivalence piece and identifying what you care about more, I'm thinking as a parent, I just finished reading this book called Decoding Boys, and it's about raising boys is what it's about. And it was a great book. I really enjoyed it. And one of the things that it talked about is how as boys grow into that puberty phase, it's very natural for them to talk less. And so if you're a parent of a kid who isn't really forthcoming with how they're feeling or how they're thinking, and you're trying to help motivate them, but you don't know what they care about more, how can you figure that out? How can you connect with them in a way that will help you to better understand them so you can do a better job of helping them stay motivated?
I think the most important thing, if I have a kid who is trying to figure out, and a lot of times when kids are in that stage where they aren't sure what to share or how to share, they're navigating so many different changes in their body and in their brain that they just need somebody to start the conversation. I think one thing that's really important is for us to remember that the best parents, their kids still aren't going to tell them everything. So when this phase you're talking about where kids aren't talking, cast a wide net for people they could talk to. And also keep trying to talk to them. And do not have a reaction, an adverse reaction, when they don't share much back, because then they're going to stop responding because they don't trust it and they don't want to inconvenience you. So I guess consistency, one of the things that, and I actually usually think of this as far as like system change work goes, but it applies to this too. Gentle pressure constantly applied creates change. Be warm, be gentle, be open. When they decide not to share with you, respect that. Tell them they don't have to share with you because they don't. Don't tell them they do. And try to be a consistent, calming, centering presence in their life.
Something that has happened with one of my grandkids that I think is very common among teens. And I thought of it when Christopher was talking about kids talk less.
Yeah.
But this is and it fits in with the I don't care that you were talking about earlier, Nick. So I have a grandson who, when he was in high school, would not do his work for a particular class because he didn't like the teacher.
Mm.
I hate that teacher. I'm not going to do my homework. I'm not going to turn it in. I'm just not going to do it. His parents, my daughter and son-in-law, regularly would say to him, well, who does that hurt? It hurts nobody but you. And he'd be like, I don't care. I don't care. So he was not getting good grades at all. And continually they'd say, who would that hurt? And he would say, I don't care. Sometimes I feel like the motivation, the parents have a different kind of motivation than the kid has, and we can't get the two on the same page. So I hear what you're saying about we got to listen to our kids and cast a wide net and be gentle. But there are times when you also have to comply with instruction. And what do you do when a kid says, I don't care, I don't want to?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to that sort of behavioral approach, we need to be consistent. If you don't blank, then blank and then follow through. And that's not a threat. We struggle with some of those behavioral responses because we're worried that it's going to actually create an unsafe environment and they're not going to respond well. That can happen. But we can set boundaries. We can set expectations really, really clearly with kids and tell them why. And then whatever the consequence is, though, that needs to be consistent and repeated. Whether somebody is going to do something or not is up to them, not us. Right? When it comes down to it. If somebody is like, you cannot force anybody to do anything. And that is like one of the core principles of motivational interviewing is you respect that autonomy. And so I worry about getting into too big of traps where we say that. Now, you can give the consequences for things, but that's where I would try to tie it back to what do they value? Like, how does this actually impact them in some way, and be more concrete? When you ask the question of, does this hurt you? What does that mean? Like, when you like hurt how? Like, I feel like that part needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. I don't know if that
Okay.
answers your question or
Well,
not.
it really does, because I think what you're getting at is you also allow the consequences to happen. And I do think that maybe both educators and parents have a hard time just letting the consequences happen. So we give multiple opportunities, and then they don't ever really have to do anything different because whatever they're doing is working. The not caring is working.
hmm Yeah, I feel like it's the same thing that you see in any workplace where you have your employees that are high performers, you have the ones that are low performers, and then you have the ones in the middle, right? And I think the hardest ones are the ones that are low performers, but they aren't such low performers that you can fire them. Like, what do you do? Right? And because you can't force them to do anything worse, but you also can't fire them. So how do you then create reward structures? That's something we've been working a lot here, and I know can be effective in working with kids too. Is it's not just what's the punishment for if something goes bad, but what's the reward for if something goes good, and how can we make those rewards intrinsic and something that is tangible enough to change behavior moving forward.
And that kind of touches on an aspect of motivation that we haven't really explicitly talked about yet in this episode, and that's intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. And so, can you take a minute and just define those two categories of motivation for our listeners?
Yeah, when somebody is extrinsically motivated, they're doing it for an external reason. Something external is influencing them. So my teacher's saying I have to do this, I don't want to disappoint my parents, that sort of thing. When there's intrinsic motivation, I'm doing it for me, right? And those intrinsic motivations might have to do with outside people. So for example, I'm going to try out for the baseball team because I want to be a part of the club. That's an intrinsic motivation that has to do with wanting to be with other people. So I don't think that one is better or worse than the other, but intrinsic motivation is going to be more sustainable than extrinsic motivation because extrinsic, even by its name, requires an outside force to be pushing to make change.
And I think what you said is really important because I feel like it's common for us to think that intrinsic motivation is better than extrinsic motivation. Like I say, oh, well, I don't want to offer you this reward for doing the bare minimum because that's just extrinsic motivation. I want you, what is that movie, The Breakup, where Jennifer Aniston says, I want you to want to do the dishes to Vince Vaughn? Anybody?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
So, but that's I feel like we kind of always have that in the back of our mind that we want people to be intrinsically motivated to do things because it's better. But what you're saying is that it's not necessarily better, it's just a different type of motivation.
Just a different type. If I'm doing something for my parent because I want to please them, because I want to have a good relationship with them, I mean, that kind of blurs the line. A desire for a good relationship is very different than I'm doing this because my mom told me to. So I even like trying to create a black and white with intrinsic and extrinsic could get us in trouble because it's on a continuum. I'm partly doing this because I don't want to get grounded, but I'm also partly doing this because I want to have a good relationship with my dad.
And that goes back to what you were saying about identifying what those values are
Yeah.
and what do you care more about?
Mm-hmm.
Just to kind of think that through together.
Well, and I think a really common value for teens, and maybe I'm projecting, you can tell me if I'm inaccurate here, but I think a really common value for somebody who's going through that phase of life with puberty is belonging. And the belonging is less about belonging with parents and family and more about belonging with my cohort at school, with my social group, with my friends.
I feel like there's a whole other, I mean, I can think of a million other questions I want to talk to you about that, but I know that we're running out of time. So, Nick, our last question is, what gives you hope about children's natural drive to grow and contribute?
I think what gives me hope about that is I am still learning from kids. Like, I would feel like at 45, I had pretty good wisdom and knowledge, but I have 7 nieces and nephews of ages 4 to 15, and they teach me things all the time. And to see them grow and change into they're each so uniquely different, and they're all going different directions, but they're all okay. And they all have their little joys and their little quirks and their little idiosyncrasies. But man, it's so rewarding to see children grow up and become who they become, regardless of what the circumstances are that they went through. So it gets personal for me with seeing my nieces and nephews and watching them become their own little people.
I think that's a great spot to end on. Sometimes we don't need to motivate our kids. They have enough motivation inside themselves to do great things, and we just need to get out of their way. So thank you, Nick, for that. And thank you, listener, for listening to Mindshift. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And you can visit us online at plcschools.org/Mindshift for more content. And be sure to join us next week